Alright, welcome to the Critical Focus channel and today's review of Zondaras Gravebreakers. I know that this is maybe a later review than I would like to generally kind of put out there, but at the same time the kind of release schedule for Games Workshop, especially for Warhammer Underworlds at the moment, I think in large due to the imminent release of AOS 4 has been really rushed. Nonetheless, we're getting a lot of stuff for the game, so we should be happy in that regard, I guess. Also, Easter came along and kind of interrupted my usual workflow here, but on the other hand, I've had time to play the Zondaras Gravebreakers, and I've also had time to kind of reflect upon my feelings on the warband. And before we get going, make sure to click all the buttons and all that stuff. So Zondaras Gravebreakers is probably my most favorite warband in terms of lore. I really like them. So first up we have Zondara Ravenheart. She is a level 2 wizard. Her kind of base stats are quite lackluster. She's only 3 move, 1 shield, 4 wounds, which is not terribly bulky for a leader type figure. She has an attack called the Wild Staff, which is range 2, 2 swords, 2 damage, which is obviously quite lackluster as well. But her main thing is the Stolen Knowledge reaction, which is a spell reaction cost on 1 focus, so that's fairly reliable. That's like 75% or so. Use this after this fighter's activation. If cast, pick 1, heal 1, friendly fighter within 3 hexes. So that's going to be very usable. Or deal 1 damage to an enemy fighter within 1. That's going to be a little bit more kind of situational, but the first one is really, really good. Also in terms of just casting spells, if you go with a heavy spell focus, just getting a certain number of spells out. There are objective cards in the faction deck that scores off of it. And if you go with a spell focus deck, you can score even more from doing a certain amount of spells in a round. Inspired. So first up also let's talk about how she inspires, which kind of mirrors how her husband Lost Furline inspires. So I can kind of mention them at the same time. So she inspires when Furline has 2 upgrades, and he inspires when Zondara has 2 upgrades. So I'll also quickly mention kind of the theme of the warband. You'll probably know it by now, but Zondara has lost her husband to a terrible curse, and now she is looking for a cure in the depths of Death Gorge. And so with the help of her minions, she is digging up treasure to kind of find the cure, basically. Yeah, a very cool and thematic warband. Let's look at her inspired side. She goes to 2 shields, which is very respectable. Her wild staff goes to 3 swords, so that's looking a bit better. It's actually quite a nice profile with range as well. And the spell reaction stays the same. Let's go over to Furline. He is quite the beast, and he is a beast. He has the beast keyword. He is 4 move, so a little bit faster, 2 dodge, so a little bit tankier, 4 wounds as well. His rending assault is 1 range, 3 swords, 2 damage with Grievous, quite a nice profile. And also I should mention, both he and Zondara has the tragedy mechanic, which means that in the power step, in place of playing a power card, you can discard an objective card that names 1 or more friendly fighters that are out of action and draw an objective card. So that means the actual text on the card, not the the lore text. That wouldn't make sense. Inspired, he goes to 5 move, so quite fast, and instead of 2 damage Grievous, he goes to plain 3 damage, which is very, very nice. That's them, so just keep in mind that he's a beast, so you don't erroneously place any upgrades on him that he can't have, or kind of forget that he can't hold objectives and stuff like that. There is a card that kind of makes him not being a beast anymore. Anyway, let's move over to the little guys. They are called Pick, Crack, Tomb, and Toil, and I will mention them all at the same time. They are 3 move, 1 shield, 2 wounds, uninspired. They inspire when they are raised, and then they go up to 3 wounds, but otherwise stays the same basically. Their attacks I'm not going to mention because they are like 1 sword, 2 damage, or 2 swords, 1 damage. I think the best they kind of get this Toil's attack with 2 range, 2 swords, 2 damage. I guess that could be decent when you have like plus dice. Otherwise they are not there to attack, they are there to do Gravebreak, Unearth, and Exhume, which is a huge part of the warband's mechanic. And I will talk about the Gravebreak first, which means that you can react to this fight's activation, and it goes for all of them. When they are on an objective token, and they are all beasts, just remember that as well. And then they can kind of move that objective token and place it in an adjacent hex. So after having done that, they can then either unearth or exhume. Exhume means that they raise one of the other minions and place that minion in a hex adjacent to themselves. So not necessarily the objective token they moved, but oftentimes you will want to kind of do that. They can also unearth, which means that they search your power deck for a Zondaras Gravebreaker's upgrade, so a faction upgrade, reveal the card, so you have to show your opponent the card, and then you add it to your hand. So this is a very, very strong mechanic, and it plays well into the lore kind of theme of the warband very well. So I think lore-wise they have constructed this warband wonderfully well. So yeah, they have a strong race mechanic here, and they also have a strong kind of upgrade kind of sniping mechanic here. And there are some really strong stuff in the upgrade deck, so I mean, both of these mechanics are very strong and very vital to the warband's longevity. That's them. So let's look at the deck then. So as always, let's start with the searches. First up we have Cruel Hope, which is scored immediately after a power step if a friendly fur line has 2 more upgrades. It's not that hard to do, I guess. It is one of your main fighters, but it is quite specific. You need to probably not draw it in your first round, and you need to have him alive. So it's a risky objective. We do have the tragedy thing there to kind of shuffle it out, but every time you shuffle an objective out, it's lost, right? You have to discard it. It's not like you shuffle it back. It's not a mulligan. You can't score it anymore. And that's one less objective you can score then. So, I mean, it is what it is. He is one of your most survivable fighters, but he's also one of your most offensive fighters. So he might be very targeted. Although I think opponents will probably target Zondara first before she inspires and goes to that 2 shields, which can be kind of a hard thing to get through. So yeah, it is what it is. Next up we have Desperate Inspiration, which is scored immediately after a friendly Zondara casts a second or subsequent spell in the same phase. She has that reaction, and that counts towards this search card. So with that in mind, I think it's pretty decent. Just pay attention to the fact that you can't do the reaction if you don't have anyone to heal or damage. So if you can't fulfill the kind of spell reaction, you can't really cast it, because it's not like heal up to 1 damage or deal up to 1 damage or something like that. It's you have to heal or do damage. So with that said, there are 3 quite decent spells in here, and if you go the spell route, you can make this even more reliable. So I think it's not too bad. Next up we have Ever Searching, which is scored immediately after you warband's second or subsequent Gravebreaker reaction in the same phase. I think this is quite strong, but you have to kind of make sure that you have objectives kind of close to yourself, because your minions are pretty slow, and objectives can still be removed or flipped over and stuff like that. So just make sure to kind of play into this with your set up crucial part of the game. Next up we have Soulbound Killers. It's scored immediately after a fighter is taken out of action, either by Zondara or Furline, and you can get an extra glory if you are assisted by the other fighter, basically. I think this is quite good. Even though it requires you to kill someone with a specific fighter, you can kill with either one of them, and basically if both of these fighters are out of action, you're kind of screwed anyway. So I think this is a pretty good, and just to kind of spoil it for you, I actually managed to set this one up to score that extra glory in my game, but that might have been just pure luck, but so I think it's quite good. Next up we have Strength of Despair. Scores immediately after friendly Zondara spell or action. Takes 1 or more enemy fights out of action. So you could do this with a reaction, with a Gambit spell, or an attack action, basically. So it's quite versatile with how you kill them with Zondara. It's just that you have to kill them with Zondara, and I think Furline is the more likely to do the brunt of your attacks. But if you get a certain spell upgrade out, I think it's not too bad. I just think that Soulbound Killers is a lot better. Still not awful. Rest from the Realm is next, and that's the last of the searches. It's scored immediately after friendly fighter's Gravebreaker reaction, if that fighter is in enemy territory. I mean, it also depends on the setup, basically, but so try to get maybe 1 objective just inside opponent's half, and this is pretty simple to score, actually. So I think it's quite doable. Next up we have the end phases. The first of them is called the Dreamer's Respite. It's scored in an end phase if there is a friendly surviving Zondara and there is a friendly surviving Furline. And if you score this in the third end phase, you gain 2 extra glory. And the nice thing is here with this card is that you can kind of hold on to it if you want to gamble, or score it earlier if you feel that one of them is kind of on the brink of death, I guess. Still, I think it asks a lot for 1 glory, as I'm not too keen on it generally speaking. Next up we have Fates Entwined. It's a hybrid for 1 glory if your 2 main fighters are within 2 hexes of each other basically, or if they are both dead. So if you score it the second way for 1 simple glory, you are screwed. I mean, for the first end phase it's pretty doable, I guess, in the first way, but it's a very risky objective for 1 glory. So I think in a more built environment I wouldn't take it. Life and Death is next. It's 2 glory, scores in an end phase if there are more surviving inspired friendly fighters than there are surviving inspired enemy fighters. I think generally speaking it's pretty good. They're not too hard to inspire, you can raise fighters, but versus certain opponents, obviously it's a very tall order. Sarbags, Exile Dead, and so on and so forth. But I mean, versus 3-man teams, 4-man teams, it's going to be pretty simple to do. But it's very meta dependent. Next up is No Stone Unturned. Scores an end phase if you placed 3 or more different feature tokens in the preceding action phase. So I think it's 2 glory, so that's quite nice. But unless you build specifically towards this, I think, and obviously there is the kind of plunder thing as well. If you are not like me and actually remember to use that reaction, I guess it's decent. But yeah, I think you still kind of need to kind of build towards it with something like Fearsome Fortress or Daring Delvers. Fits this objective quite nicely. So if you kind of want to mix and match with those specific, I guess the Force of Frost as well, right? Those specific rival decks, I think it could be pretty decent. And 2 glory is nice. Next up we have Reckless Effort. Scores an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter that is not a minion has 1 or more charge tokens. So having charge tokens on your main fighters basically. That's quite easy. You don't need both alive. So I think that's fine for 1 glory. Then we have Tireless Revenant. Scores an end phase if each surviving friendly minion has 1 or more tokens. I'm not too keen on this one, because if you raise with your last activation, and you very might want to be doing that to score some of the searches, or just have enough fighters left going into the next round, you won't come back with a move token or guard token or whatever, really. I don't think it's reliable enough for 1 glory. Then we have the Gambits. Blind Devotion is first. Reaction plays after an enemy fight's move action that ends within 2 hexes of a friendly Zondara. Push another friendly fighter up to 2 hexes or up to 4 hexes if that fighter is furline, so that they are adjacent to the enemy fighters. Basically like a counter charge. I like that it's only within 2 of Zondara, because it kind of gives you more opportunity to play the card. I don't think it's too bad. I mean, it's restricted to Zondara, so you could just salvage it if she's dead, I guess. But I think it could, I mean, Counter Charge is a really nice card, right? So it's similar to that card, and I think Counter Charge goes into a lot of championship decks. So I think this could definitely render an inclusion. It could set you up for assist in the upcoming activation, or help you with assist in the defense, or yeah, a lot of kind of uses for this card. Bond Unbroken. You can reroll 1 attack dice in Furline's attack rolls while there is a surviving friendly Zondara. You can reroll defense dice in Zondara's defense rolls while there is a surviving friendly Furline. This effect persists until the end of the phase. This one is bound to Furline, which means you have to have him alive when you play it, but both fighters get the effect. I think the effect is strong enough to include it. Having a reroll in attacks for the duration of the round, or reroll for defense if you are on those 2 shields with Zondara, I think that's really nice. It's obviously a risky card, not really risky card, I guess. I think I wish it had kind of a secondary, weaker effect if one of them was dead, I guess, but I think it still is strong enough to render an inclusion. Cobbled Corpse. Reaction. Play this after a friendly minion is taken out of action. Place that minion within 1 hex of an objective token in your territory. Then give that fighter a raise counter on either move or a charge token. So this one actually then helps you to score Tireless Revenants. I guess that's kind of the reason why it's in here. And you get a raise for free. That's nice. I like that you kind of potentially only get a move token and not necessarily charge token. Also then you can still move them on to an objective token to do the Gravebreaker reaction if you have an upcoming activation. I think that's pretty nice card actually. And I mean, your minions will die a lot, so getting a free raise is pretty nice. Curious Remnants. Choose a friendly fighter within 1 hex of 1 or more feature tokens and pick 1. Heal 1 that fighter or push that fighter 1 hex. Being within 1 hex of 1 or more feature tokens is a situation you find yourself in very often, and that even includes then being on that actual feature token, because the feature token is within 1 hex of itself. So it's very versatile, and you will get a lot of mileage out of the card. pushes are very strong. And I mean, the option to do a heal is nice as well, but I think mostly you will use the push. Next up is Devoted Strike, +1 dice to the first attack action made by a friendly fighter other than Zondara in the next activation. So that could go for Furline as well as any of the minions. And the added effect here is if a friendly Zondara is within 2 hexes of the target of the attack action, that attack has cleave as well. I mean, it's a nice little bonus. I think just +1 dice is generally very good. Driven Lurch, push each friendly minion up to 1 hex. I like that it's up to 1 hex because then you don't necessarily have to push if you are in a good spot with any one of them. I like this one a lot. I think it's great. Multiple fighter pushes are very good, even if it's just for the minions. Maniac Pursuit. After an enemy fighter makes a move action or is taken out of action, choose a friendly fighter. The chosen fighter makes a move action that must end adjacent to that enemy fighter or in the hex the enemy fighter was in when they were taken out of action. So that's kind of more kind of free out of sequence moves or push, similar to Blind Devotion. I think it's very good and definitely renders an inclusion. Just pay attention to, like, if you kill someone with the minion and then use it on that fighter to move them onto an objective token, say, that would then occupy the same reaction window as the Gravebreaker reaction. So just keep that in mind, I guess. Then we have 3 spells. First up is Atavistic Creativity, which is a mouthful. It's cast on 1 channel, so very reliable. Plays after you place a feature token. If cast, give a friendly fighter an upgrade. Do not spend any glory points when you do so. So it is to help any one of your 2 main fighters to inspire earlier. And it's a boost, especially for the first one, when you might be starved for glory. I mean, it's very reliable, and it triggers after the Gravebreaker reaction basically, or even like Plunder. Getting an upgrade for free isn't super crucial most of the time, I guess, but with this warband specifically, it could be very vital. Rite of the Unbound is a Gambit spell cast on 1 focus, so slightly less reliable, but pretty much so anyway, on a level 2 wizard. If you cast it, you choose a friendly fighter within 3 hexes of the caster, so that could mean Zondara herself. In the next activation, for each success, including critical successes in the casting roll, that fighter has +1 move, and the attack actions have Grievous 1. So if I read that correctly, which I'm not sure I'm doing, that means that for each success you get Grievous 1 and Grievous stacks, so that could mean a lot of Grievous then. That's pretty nice. Still, like, plus move and Grievous, I don't think it's necessarily all that fantastic. I think in a spell-focused deck this might not make the cut. Wild Incantation, Gambit spell 1 channel, bound to Zondara as well, all of these spells are. If cast, consider rolls of full supports as successes in attack made by friendly fighters. The effect persists until the end of the phase. I mean, we all hit on swords, so I guess it's pretty decent, and it persists until the end of the phase. I think it's not too bad, generally speaking, so I think that little bit of damage boost when hitting on swords is quite nice, actually. Let's check the upgrades. First up we have Amberbone Infusion. This fighter's defense characteristic is 2 shields. This is obviously not very useful on the main fighters, since the Inspired 2 defense dice both of them, so this is obviously aimed at the minions, so they become quite tanky then with 3 wounds, 2 block, Inspired. Could be quite nice. Is it super useful? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would include it in a build deck. Cursed Flesh is +1 wound. After this fighter is taken out of action, break this card. So I guess it's supposed to go mostly on the main fighters, but just keep in mind that will make the fighters large. But I think still it could be worth it, since Zondara could be brought down very easily with 2 damage attacks. And I think it still is worth it, even though she's now worth 2 glory. I mean, or Furline for that matter. And having both alive is so vital for the warband, so I think that a +1 wound could be really useful, actually. Next up we have Cursed Strength, +1 damage to range 1 and range 2 on this fighter's fighter card. After this fighter's range 1 or 2 attack action, deal 1 damage to this fighter. It's a bit rough, since you get pinged back even if you don't succeed with the attack. I think that could have been enough, I guess. Seems overly damaging, I guess. But +1 damage cards are rather scarce, so I think still it's probably good enough to include. Then we have no less than 7 cards bound to Zondara and Furline. First up is Borrowed Power for Zondara, which means that her attack actions have Cleave and Grievous 1. That goes for every attack. And there's a spell attack action here in the upgrade allotment, which I got a lot of mileage out of in my game actually. I think I probably wouldn't include this card if it was only one of the effects, but together, and the fact that it's not only for like range 1 and 2, makes it quite usey actually. Broken Heart, it's restricted to Zondara or Furline, while a friendly Zondara or a friendly Furline is out of action, +1 dice to this fight's attack actions, and this fighter is inspired. Reaction, when a friendly Zondara or a friendly Furline is taken out of action, give this to a friendly fighter. Do not spend any glory points when you do so. +1 dice, I think it's quite nice to have in there as like an extra little safety thing when one of them dies. I mean, you could be semi-screwed when one of them dies, but you should in no way, shape or form give up when they do, because it will happen in a lot of games. So having this one in there is quite nice. And even if this card does nothing for you, and you can still equip it even if none of them are out of action. It just won't have any effect until one of them is. So it still counts towards inspiring them. So I think it's a nice little extra kind of consolation thing for when your main game plan goes awry. Cursed Power is +1 wizard level, bound to Zondara, but this fighter suffers backlash if there are one or more crits in the casting rolls. And with +1 wizard level, you're now casting 3 dice. So getting backlash on your 4 wound leader, I don't think it's worth it, and she will be accurate enough with 2 dice. Obviously, she will be able to fish for that Grievous more easily, but I think the backlash is just too heavy of a price to pay for that. Next up we have Excavated Bludgeon, which is an attack action that you can give to beasts, which is 1 range 2 swords 3 damage, but it's bound to minions. I don't think it's accurate enough to include really. I probably wouldn't take an upgrade in this warband that I can't put on one of the 2 main fighters, and with this card you can't. And then we have Reshaped Darts, which is that spell attack action on Zondara, 4 range, hits on channels and does 1 damage. And with that Grievous upgrade, I think this one is really good. This gives her more options to pull the reaction on. And this is quite a nice attack action in and of itself as well. So this one will definitely go into my decks. Then we have Salvaged Intelligence, which is bound to Furline, which means that he is not a beast anymore. And he can't be a beast even, which is something to keep in mind when I don't think it's a good option. But if you would like go for something like Tooth and Claw, there would be some cards there wouldn't kind of play ball together with this card. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Then we have a reaction. After friendly Zondara's activation, if this fighter did not make a charge super action, this fighter makes an action other than a super action. I think that's a really good reaction. Obviously it's a bit restricted, but in my game I had like 4 or 5 opportunities, especially when I got that spell attack action out with Zondara, when I could use this card. I kind of forgot to use it. He can basically put himself on guard, make a move, or do an attack if he has an eligible target. So you could do a double whammy with Zondara and him. It's a very strong card. I think you should always take it. Then we have Undying Love, which is bound to Furline, which means that if there is a surviving friendly Zondara and a surviving friendly Furline, you heal each of those fighters, and then you can push one of those fights up to 3 hexes towards the other. Obviously it's quite restricted, but it kind of even further cements their survivability. Do I think it's super necessary? I don't necessarily think you need to take this card. Maybe it's like 1 safety belt too much, I guess. Especially in build formats, probably take something better. It's still not terrible, and if you're sizing up to score that Dreamer's Respite in the 3rd end phase, it's a nice little extra safety cushion to make sure that they are both alive. But I don't think, generally speaking, it's super necessary. And the push towards each other is there to score Fates Entwined as well, to be within 2 hexes of each other. So yeah, that's the complete kind of walkthrough and review of the deck. What do I think of it? I think it's a very lovely warband. It is a risky warband though, because if one of these 2 main fighters dies, a lot of the card interactions and stuff like that kind of crumble. You can still probably win, but it's going to be way harder when both of them are not alive. And I think the more people will go up against these guys, the more they will kind of snipe one of them. And they are not that tanky, either one of them, that they can kind of withstand the brunt of a really aggressive team for too long. I'm very interested to see how they fare when they have been out a while and when people have played them a lot. I mean, I think in terms of lore, this warband is just S tier. I think there are a lot of interesting cards here. I don't necessarily think there were too many in either the upgrade allotment or the Gambit allotment there that was like, this is a really crappy card, don't take it. I think most of the cards were pretty good actually. I mean, the Excavated Blood is probably not needed, and one of the spells weren't maybe super strong. Objective deck seems quite decent as well. I think the general glory is a bit low maybe. In terms of rival deck pairing, I think the Beastbound Assault is looking pretty nice. I think even Fearsome Fortress or Daring Delvers could be nice as well. I think you could also go with a spell focus deck as well. I mean, the Search deck is pretty good here, so you don't really need to complement with an enormous amount of universal cards. So I think there are a lot of options for this warband. It's a very interesting warband, one of the like we have never seen before, and I must say, I really enjoyed playing them, and I got to use a lot of synergy all over the place. I know though that every experience with them will not be like that, but I still think the potential with them is really high, but they can also probably crumble very easily. So it's going to be a very fine balancing act there. I personally really like that challenge. If it's the warband for you, I have no idea. Are they too dependent on having the two main fighters alive, or can they kind of perform with only one of them alive? What's your experience? What's your thoughts? Let me know what you think. That has been me for tonight. And before I go, I would also like to give a huge thank you to all my lovely members, which is Jonas Faring, Matt Gaming 80, Eggywags, Thomas Graham, and Who Am I Again? Your support truly means a lot to me. So, without further ado, I'll let the end credits roll now. Bye.
This is Mats again, chiming in to thank you for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and to not miss out on future content, ring the bell as well. And if you really liked this video, feel free to click the thanks button just below this video. And if you want to support me even further, you can now become a channel member and claim the title of Critical Focus fan. Until next time, take care, bye.